The dust from Yancy Zeller's worn boots scattered across the wooden floorboards of the general store as he entered. 6 years of loneliness weighing on his shoulders like the heavy saddle he carried at dawn. It was 1875 in the small settlement of Riverbank, Colorado, and the harsh reality of raising a 5-year-old daughter alone on a struggling cattle ranch had left permanent lines across his sun-weathered face. "Afternoon, Yancy," called Josiah Miller from behind the counter, his gray mustache twitching sympathetically. "Emma doing all right these days," Yancy nodded, pulling his list from his pocket. "Growing like a weed, needs new boots again." His voice held the same quiet gruffness it had carried since his wife Sarah's passing during that terrible winter of '69. As Yancy gathered his supplies, the store's bell chimed, announcing a new arrival. He turned instinctively, a rancher's habit of noting every change in his surroundings. The woman who entered wore a simple blue traveling dress, her chestnut hair pinned neatly beneath a modest hat. She carried herself with a quiet dignity that immediately caught his attention. "Miss Turner," Josiah called out cheerfully, "your supplies are ready as promised." "Thank you, Mr. Miller," she replied, her voice carrying a slight Eastern accent that stood out in their frontier town. Yancy continued gathering his items, but found his gaze returning to the newcomer. When their eyes met briefly, he quickly looked away, unaccustomed to such interactions after years of solitude. "Mr. Zeller here owns the Crosswind Ranch," Josiah said, gesturing toward Yancy. "Miss Winifred Turner arrived last week. She's our new schoolteacher." Yancy tipped his hat awkwardly. "Madam, Mr. Zeller," she acknowledged with a polite nod. "I believe I'll be meeting your daughter tomorrow. Emma, isn't it?" "Yes," Yancy replied, suddenly aware of his dust-covered clothes and unshaven face. "First day of school for her," Miss Turner smiled. "I look forward to it." Something in her smile reminded him of Sarah, though the two women looked nothing alike. Perhaps it was simply kindness, a quality so rare in the harsh territory that it struck him like an unexpected cool breeze in August. "Emma's excited," he added, surprising himself with the volunteered information. "Been talking about nothing else for weeks." "That's wonderful to hear. Children's enthusiasm for learning is what makes teaching worthwhile." Josiah finished preparing Miss Turner's order and she gathered her parcels. "Could I help you with those?" Yancy heard himself ask. Miss Turner hesitated, then nodded. "That would be very kind, thank you." They walked together into the bright afternoon sun, Yancy carrying the heavier supplies while maintaining a respectful distance. "The schoolhouse is just up ahead," she said, gesturing with her free hand. "I know. Built it myself, along with some of the other ranchers back when the settlement was newer." "Really?" She glanced at him with new interest. "Then I have you to thank for my new home." "The teachers' quarters were added last year," he explained, "after old Mr. Peterson retired. Town council decided we needed to offer better accommodations to attract a qualified teacher." They reached the small white building at the edge of town, a modest schoolhouse with the teacher's residence attached at the rear. Yancy set the supplies on the porch while Miss Turner retrieved her key. "Thank you for your help, Mr. Zeller." "Yancy," he said, then cleared his throat. "Folks just call me Yancy." "Then thank you, Yancy," she smiled again. "I'm Winifred, though most people call me Winnie. Pleased to make your acquaintance, Miss Winnie." "Just Winnie is fine." A moment of silence stretched between them, neither quite ready to part ways. "I should get back," Yancy finally said. "Got a ranch to run." "Of course, I'll see Emma tomorrow." Yancy nodded, replaced his hat, and turned toward where his horse was hitched outside the general store. He felt her watching him walk away and resisted the urge to look back. The 5-mile ride back to Crosswind Ranch gave him too much time to think. The land rolled out around him, his cattle grazing in the distance, the mountains standing sentinel against the endless blue sky. It was beautiful country but lonely. Sarah had loved it here. "This land has a heartbeat," she used to say. After her death, the rhythm had continued, but Yancy could no longer hear it. As the weathered fence line of Crosswind came into view, Yancy spotted Mrs. Hodgson hanging laundry in the yard. The older woman had been a godsend, agreeing to help with Emma and the housekeeping after Sarah died. Without her, Yancy might have had to give up the ranch altogether. "Pa," Emma's excited voice rang out as she spotted him approaching. She dashed from where she'd been playing, her dark braids bouncing with each step. At 5 years old, she was the spitting image of her mother, same dark hair, same bright eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. Yancy dismounted and swept her into his arms. "There's my girl." "Have you been good for Mrs. Hodgson?" Emma nodded vigorously. "I helped with the biscuits and gathered all the chicken eggs without breaking a single one." "That's so. Sounds like you've been busy." He set her down, leading his horse toward the barn. "Is it true I start school tomorrow, Pa?" "Real school with other children. It is indeed." He smiled down at her eager face. "And I met your teacher today, Miss Turner. She seems nice." "Is she pretty?" Emma asked with the directness only a child could muster. Yancy felt his neck warm. "She's respectable looking." "That's not what I asked," Emma persisted. "Yes," he conceded. "I suppose she is pretty." "Like Ma was in the picture." Yancy's chest tightened. "Nobody's pretty like your Ma was." He ruffled her hair. "Now go help Mrs. Hodgson while I tend to Rusty here." In the barn, as he removed the saddle from his horse, Yancy found himself thinking about Winnie Turner's smile. It had been so long since he'd noticed such things about a woman that the feeling was almost foreign. Guilt followed quickly. Sarah had only been gone 6 years. Was that long enough to justify such thoughts? That evening, after Emma was tucked into bed, Yancy sat on the porch watching darkness settle over his land. Mrs. Hodgson brought him a cup of coffee before retiring to her room. "She's all excited about school tomorrow," the older woman said. "Laid out her dress 3 times, checking for any spots I might have missed." Yancy nodded. "Thank you for getting everything ready." Mrs. Hodgson hesitated. "It's good, you know, her having more people in her life. A woman teacher might be especially good for her." Yancy sipped his coffee, not responding. "You met her, the new teacher, briefly." And he glanced at her. "And what, Mrs. Hodgson?" "Nothing." The older woman smiled knowingly, just curious. After she left, Yancy remained on the porch longer than usual, his thoughts drifting between the past and the uncertain future. Tomorrow, Emma would begin a new chapter in her life. He wondered what Sarah would think of their daughter now, so grown up already. The weight of raising Emma alone pressed on him anew. There were things a girl needed to learn that he couldn't teach her, experiences he couldn't provide. Morning came with Emma's excited chatter as she ate breakfast faster than usual. Mrs. Hodgson had braided her hair with special care, tying the ends with blue ribbons that matched her best dress. "You look mighty fine," Yancy told her as he helped her onto the wagon seat beside him. "Do you think the other children will like me, Pa?" A hint of worry crossed her face for the first time. "They'd be fools not to," he said firmly. "Just be yourself, and remember what we talked about. Be respectful to your teacher and don't talk out of turn." The ride to town passed with Emma pointing out every bird and rabbit they saw. Her excitement was contagious, and Yancy found himself smiling more than he had in months. As they approached the schoolhouse, they could see other families arriving. About 15 children of various ages were gathered in the yard. Miss Turner stood on the porch, greeting each one with a warm smile. Yancy helped Emma down from the wagon, noticing how she suddenly pressed against his leg, her earlier confidence wavering at the sight of so many strangers. "It's all right," he murmured, taking her hand. "Let's go meet your teacher properly." As they approached, Winnie Turner's face brightened. "Good morning, Mr. Zeller." Her gaze shifted downward. "And you must be Emma. I'm very pleased to meet you." Emma gave a small curtsy as Mrs. Hodgson had taught her. "Good morning, madam." "What beautiful braids you have," Winnie said, bending slightly to be at Emma's level. "Mrs. Hodgson did them special for today," Emma replied, her shyness beginning to fade. "They're perfect for your first day of school." Winnie straightened and met Yancy's eyes. "She'll be fine, Mr. Zeller." "School lets out at 3 o'clock. Yancy nodded, suddenly reluctant to leave. "I'll be here to pick her up." Emma tugged at his hand. "I'll be all right, Pa. I'm a big girl now." He squeezed her hand and let go. "Indeed you are. Make me proud." He watched as Winnie gently guided Emma toward a group of girls her age before returning to the wagon. As he drove back to the ranch, the schoolhouse growing smaller behind him, Yancy felt an odd mixture of pride and loneliness. His little girl was growing up. The day passed slowly as Yancy threw himself into ranch work mending fences, checking on a pregnant heifer, and breaking a new horse for riding. The physical labor helped distract him from thoughts of Emma's first day, but as 3 o'clock approached, he found himself cleaning up and changing his shirt before heading back to town. He arrived at the schoolhouse just as children began pouring out the front door. Emma spotted him immediately and ran toward the wagon, her face alight with excitement. Pa, school is wonderful. Miss Turner taught us letters and numbers, and I already knew most of them from you teaching me. And I made friends with a girl named Lily whose pa has a store, and Miss Turner said my reading is very good for my age. Yancy lifted her onto the wagon seat. Sounds like you had quite a day. The best day, Emma declared. Miss Turner wants to talk to you. Yancy's pulse quickened. Is something wrong? No, silly. She said it's a good thing. He secured the reins and walked toward the schoolhouse where Winnie stood by the door, bidding farewell to the last students. She wore a simple green dress today, her hair pulled back in a practical bun, though a few strands had escaped during the day's activities. Mr. Zeller, she greeted him. I wanted to compliment you on Emma's preparation. It's clear someone has been teaching her at home. Her reading skills are quite advanced for her age, pride swelled in Yancy's chest. Her mother started teaching her letters as soon as she could talk. I've tried to keep it up. You've done an excellent job, Winnie's expression softened. She spoke of her mother today when the children were sharing about their families. She seems to have very fond memories. Sarah, my wife, she was a teacher back east before we married, Yancy explained. Always said education was the greatest gift we could give our daughter. Winnie nodded. A wise woman. Emma also mentioned that you read to her every night, just simple stories, nothing fancy. It makes all the difference. Winnie hesitated. Actually, I have a favor to ask. The school library is quite limited. I was wondering if you might know of anyone in town who might have books they could donate or lend to the school, children's books especially. Sarah had quite a collection, Yancy found himself saying. They're packed away, but, well, they should be read, not gathering dust. Winnie's face brightened. That would be wonderful, only if you're comfortable with it, of course. I'll bring some next time, he promised. Their conversation was interrupted by Emma calling from the wagon. Pa, Mrs. Hodgson is making apple pie tonight. We can't be late. Yancy tipped his hat. Duty calls. Good day, Miss Turner. Good day, Mr. Zeller, and thank you. As they drove home, Emma chattered continuously about her day, the other children, and especially Miss Turner. She has the nicest voice when she reads stories, Pa, almost as nice as yours. And she can draw pictures on the board so fast. She drew a horse that looked just like Rusty. Yancy listened, pleased by his daughter's enthusiasm. Sounds like you think highly of Miss Turner. I like her, Emma declared. Do you like her, Pa? The directness of the question caught him off guard. She seems to be a good teacher. But do you like her? Emma persisted. I hardly know her, Emma. Well, I think you should get to know her, Emma said with the confidence of a child. She asked about you too. Yancy nearly dropped the reins. What do you mean? She asked if it was just you and me and Mrs. Hodgson at the ranch, and if you've lived here a long time and if you like books too. Is that so? Yancy tried to keep his voice neutral. MMHMM. And I told her you're the best pa in the whole territory, and that you work harder than anybody, and that you can tame any horse, and that you make the best pancakes on Sundays. Yancy couldn't help but laugh. You told her all that, did you? Yes. And I told her you get lonely sometimes when you think I'm asleep, and you sit on the porch by yourself. His laughter faded. Emma. I just thought she should know, Emma said seriously, in case she gets lonely too. The rest of the ride passed in contemplative silence, broken only by Emma's occasional observations about butterflies or clouds. Yancy found himself wondering what Winnie Turner had thought of his daughter's candid revelations. The following morning, Yancy added an extra task to his preparations. He climbed into the attic and found the trunk containing Sarah's books. Opening it released the faint scent of lavender. Sarah had always tucked dried sprigs among her belongings. For a moment, the familiar scent transported him back 6 years to when their small family had been complete. He selected a half-dozen children's books, some showing signs of wear from when Sarah had read them to Emma as a baby. His fingers lingered on the familiar covers before he wrapped them carefully in cloth and placed them in a wooden box for transport. When he delivered Emma to school that day, he brought the box with him. Several parents lingered in the schoolyard, but Yancy waited until they had departed before approaching Winnie with his offering. "These were my wife's," he said simply, handing her the box. "Emma's outgrown some of them, but there might be younger children who'd enjoy them." Winnie opened the box, her expression brightening as she examined the books. "These are wonderful, Mr. Zeller. The children will be thrilled." "Yancy," he reminded her, "and it's no trouble. They should be read, not stored away." Their conversation was interrupted by the school bell. As Winnie excused herself to begin the day's lessons, Yancy found himself watching her walk away, struck by the grace in her movements and the gentle authority she projected. Over the following weeks, a routine developed. Yancy would deliver Emma to school in the mornings, exchanging brief pleasantries with Winnie, and return in the afternoons, occasionally lingering to discuss Emma's progress. These moments became highlights in his otherwise solitary days. One afternoon in early October, Yancy arrived at the schoolhouse to find the children engaged in an outdoor activity. Winnie was leading them in collecting autumn leaves of various colors and shapes. Emma, spotting him from across the schoolyard, waved enthusiastically, but remained with her group. Winnie approached him, her cheeks flushed from the crisp fall air. "We're having an impromptu nature study. I hope you don't mind waiting a few minutes." "Not at all," he replied, leaning against the fence. "Looks like they're enjoying themselves." "Children need fresh air and sunshine as much as book learning," Winnie said, watching her students with evident affection. "We're creating leaf collections they can take home." "Emma will treasure that," Yancy said. "She's always collecting things from nature, rocks, feathers, interesting twigs." "Takes after her mother that way." Winnie gave him a sidelong glance. "You speak of your wife often. She must have been remarkable." "She was." Yancy's voice softened. "Too good for the likes of me, that's for certain. Still don't know why she agreed to follow me out to this wilderness." "Love makes pioneers of us all," Winnie said quietly. Their eyes met briefly, and Yancy felt something stir within him, a sensation so long dormant he barely recognized it. Before he could respond, Emma came running over, her hands full of colorful leaves. "Look, Pa. Miss Turner says these are maple leaves, and these are oak, and these funny ones are from a ginkgo tree that she planted behind the schoolhouse." "That's quite a collection," Yancy said, examining her treasures. "We're pressing them between paper," Emma explained excitedly. "Miss Turner says they'll dry flat and we can make a book of them." "That sounds like a fine project," Yancy said, glancing at Winnie with appreciation. "I should get back to the class," Winnie said. "We'll be finished in about 15 minutes. As she walked away, Emma looked up at her father with a knowing expression far too mature for her years. "You were smiling at Miss Turner." "Was I?" Yancy feigned ignorance, MMHMM. "The way you used to smile at Ma in the picture on your nightstand." Yancy felt his face warm. "That's enough of that talk. Go finish your leaf collecting." Emma skipped away, leaving Yancy to his thoughts. Was his daughter right? Was he developing feelings for Winnie Turner? And if so, what was he supposed to do about it? The town's harvest festival in late October provided an unexpected opportunity for Yancy to see Winnie outside of the school setting. Emma had been talking about the festival for weeks, especially after Winnie announced that the schoolchildren would perform songs for the town. The day of the festival dawned clear and cool. Yancy wore his good shirt and even trimmed his beard for the occasion. Emma was beside herself with excitement, wearing her Sunday dress and the new ribbon Mrs. Hodgson had bought for her hair. The town square had been transformed with harvest decorations, pumpkins, corn shocks, and colorful bunting. Tables laden with food lined one side, while musicians tuned their instruments on a makeshift stage. Children darted about, playing games and sampling treats. Yancy spotted Winnie organizing her students near the stage. She wore a rust-colored dress he hadn't seen before, and her hair was styled differently, with soft curls framing her face. She looked up as they approached, and her smile sent an unexpected warmth through him. "Emma." "Right on time," Winnie called. "We're lining up for our performance." Emma hugged her father quickly before joining the other children. "Watch me, Pa, I'm going to sing the loudest," As Winnie arranged the children in rows, she glanced at Yancy. "You clean up nicely, Mr. Zeller." "As do you, Miss Turner," he replied, feeling unusually bold. Their exchange was interrupted by Mayor Wilson announcing the start of the festival. Yancy found a spot at the edge of the crowd as the children began their performance, a medley of traditional songs accompanied by the town's fiddler. Emma, true to her word, sang with enthusiastic volume, her eyes constantly seeking her father's approval. After the performance, Emma was swept away by her school friends to participate in the children's games, leaving Yancy unexpectedly alone. He was considering finding a quiet corner to wait when Winnie appeared at his side. "Your daughter has quite the voice," she said, eyes twinkling. "Perhaps a bit too much volume for a classroom, but perfect for an outdoor performance." Yancy chuckled. "She comes by it honestly." Her mother could call cattle from 3 pastures away. "Would you like to walk with me?" Winnie asked suddenly. "The children are occupied with games for the next hour, and I've been standing all day." Surprised but pleased, Yancy nodded. They strolled away from the center of activity toward the quieter edge of town. The afternoon sun cast long shadows and the distant mountains were tinged with gold. "How are you finding Riverbank?" Yancy asked. "Must be quite different from back east." "It is," Winnie acknowledged. "But in the best possible ways. There's a directness here. People say what they mean. They help their neighbors. They value education for their children even if they haven't had much themselves." "Folks here understand what matters," Yancy agreed. "When the winters get harsh or the drought comes, all that stands between survival and ruin is community." They walked in comfortable silence for a moment before Winnie spoke again. "May I ask you something personal, Yancy?" He tensed slightly but nodded. "Emma speaks of her mother often, but she's never told me exactly what happened. I wouldn't pry, but as her teacher, I want to be sensitive to her experiences." Yancy took a deep breath. He rarely spoke of Sarah's death, but something about Winnie made him want to share the burden. "It was influenza," he said quietly. "Winter of '69, hit the settlement hard. Emma was just a baby, not even walking yet. Sarah had been nursing folks in town against my protests, said she couldn't stand by while children suffered." He paused, swallowing hard. "She fell ill suddenly. Nothing I could do. Doctor was tending to 3 other families by the time he got to our place." He trailed off, the memory still sharp despite the passing years. Winnie touched his arm gently. "I'm so sorry." Emma was spared, thank God. Mrs. Hodgson took her in during the worst of it. "After Sarah passed, I didn't know how I'd manage a ranch and a baby alone. Mrs. Hodgson offered to help until I got back on my feet. 6 years later, she's still with us." "You've done a remarkable job with Emma," Winnie said softly. "She's bright, kind, curious, everything a child should be." "That's Sarah's doing, not mine," Yancy insisted. "I just try not to undo the good start her mother gave her." "You're too modest," Winnie said. "Children know when they're loved. Emma clearly adores you." They had reached a small creek that marked the edge of town. Yancy picked up a flat stone and skipped it across the water. "What about you?" he asked, changing the subject. "What brings a refined Eastern lady to our dusty corner of Colorado territory?" Winnie smiled wryly. "Is it that obvious I'm from the East?" "Only when you say words like quarter or forward," he teased. "Your accent comes through." "I'm from Massachusetts originally," she admitted. "I taught at a girls' school in Boston for 3 years after completing my education. It was stifling. All those rigid rules and artificial constraints." She looked out across the open landscape. "I wanted something real. When I saw the advertisement for a teacher in a Western settlement, it felt like an answer to a question I'd been asking myself. And has it been real enough for you?" She turned to face him, her eyes reflecting the golden afternoon light. "More real than anything I've ever known." Something in her gaze made Yancy's heart beat faster. They stood at the creek's edge, the festival sounds distant behind them, the moment stretching between them like a physical thing. The spell was broken by Emma's voice calling from a distance. "Pa, I want a prize." They turned to see Emma running toward them, holding a small wooden toy horse aloft. Behind her, the festival continued in full swing. "Look what I won for knocking down all the pins." She skidded to a stop, looking between the adults with sudden perception. "Were you and Miss Turner having a private conversation?" We were just taking a break from the noise, Winnie explained smoothly. Your father was telling me about the creek. Oh. Emma looked disappointed at the mundane explanation. Well, they're starting the dancing soon. Mrs. Wilson said so. Are you going to dance, Pa? Yancy cleared his throat uncomfortably. I don't reckon so, Pumpkin, not much for dancing. But Miss Turner loves dancing. She taught us in school last week. Don't you, Miss Turner? Winnie's cheeks colored slightly. I do enjoy dancing, yes. Emma looked at her father expectantly. Well, trapped by his daughter's transparent matchmaking, Yancy fumbled for words. I suppose, if Miss Turner wouldn't mind. That is, if you'd care to. I would be delighted, Winnie said, rescuing him from his awkwardness. They returned to the festival, where lanterns were being lit as dusk approached. The musicians had begun a lively tune, and several couples were already dancing in the cleared area at the center of the square. Yancy handed Emma over to Mrs. Hodgson's care, then turned to Winnie with a mixture of nervousness and anticipation. It had been years since he'd danced with anyone. I should warn you, I'm out of practice, he said as he led her toward the dancing area. Just follow the music, she replied. Some things the body remembers even when the mind forgets. As they joined the dance, Yancy was acutely aware of Winnie's hand in his, the other resting lightly on his shoulder. They moved tentatively at first, finding their rhythm together, but soon were stepping confidently through the figures of the dance. You dance very well for someone who claims to be out of practice, Winnie observed, slightly breathless as they turned. Good partner, he replied simply. The music shifted to a slower waltz and couples around them drew closer. Yancy hesitated, but Winnie stepped naturally into the proper position, her hand warm in his, her eyes meeting his with quiet assurance. As they moved together under the lantern light, Yancy was struck by how right it felt to hold her. The guilt he had expected, the feeling that he was somehow betraying Sarah's memory, didn't materialize. Instead, he felt a sense of possibility opening before him, like a trail he hadn't known existed. From the edge of the dance area, Emma watched her father and teacher with undisguised delight, whispering excitedly to Mrs. Hodgson. When the music ended, Yancy reluctantly released Winnie's hand. Thank you for the dance, Miss Turner. Thank you, Mr. Zeller, she replied, her eyes holding his for a moment longer than necessary. The spell was broken by Mayor Wilson announcing the pie contest winners, drawing the crowd's attention. As people moved toward the judging table, Yancy and Winnie drifted apart, rejoining their respective groups, but the connection between them lingered like the notes of the waltz in the evening air. The weeks following the Harvest Festival brought subtle changes to Yancy's routine. His morning conversations with Winnie grew longer, sometimes extending beyond discussions of Emma's education. He found excuses to visit town more frequently, often timing his errands to coincide with the school's dismissal. Emma observed these changes with obvious approval, sometimes inventing reasons why her father needed to speak with Miss Turner after school. Mrs. Hodgson, too, seemed to notice, offering knowing smiles whenever Yancy returned from town with a thoughtful expression. November brought colder weather and the first dusting of snow to the mountains. The ranch demanded more of Yancy's attention as he prepared for winter, repairing outbuildings and ensuring adequate feed for the livestock. Despite the increased workload, he still made time to bring Emma to school each day. One crisp morning in mid-November, as Yancy drove Emma to school, she announced, Miss Turner is teaching us about Thanksgiving next week. She says we're each supposed to bring something that represents what we're thankful for. Is that so? Yancy asked, guiding the horses around a bend in the road. And what do you plan to bring? Emma considered the question seriously. I'm thinking about Mama's locket, the one with the picture of all three of us inside, because I'm thankful for family. Is that all right? Yancy's throat tightened with emotion. That's perfect, Pumpkin. What would you bring, Pa, if you were in school? The question caught him off guard. I reckon I'd bring a handful of crosswind soil. I'm thankful for our land, for the life it gives us. Emma nodded thoughtfully. I bet Miss Turner would like that answer. When they arrived at the schoolhouse, Winnie greeted them from the porch, wrapped in a woolen shawl against the morning chill. Good morning, Emma. Good morning, Mr. Zeller. Morning, Miss Turner, Yancy replied, helping Emma down from the wagon. As Emma ran inside to escape the cold, Winnie approached the wagon. Mr. Zeller, I wanted to ask a favor. I'm planning a special Thanksgiving lesson, and I'd like to take the children on a nature walk to collect items for decorations. I was wondering if you might be available to assist. Some of the younger children will need extra supervision. When were you thinking? Yancy asked, trying to hide his pleasure at the request. Friday afternoon, if the weather permits, just for an hour or so. I believe I could arrange that, he said, already mentally rearranging his work schedule. Wonderful, Winnie's smile brightened her face. The children will be delighted. Especially Emma. Happy to help, Yancy said simply, tipping his hat before guiding the wagon back toward the road. As he drove back to Crosswind, he found himself looking forward to Friday with unexpected anticipation. The opportunity to spend time with Winnie outside the brief moments of school drop-off and pick-up was welcome, even if they would be surrounded by children. Friday arrived with clear skies and milder temperatures, perfect weather for the planned nature walk. Yancy finished his morning chores early and rode into town, arriving at the schoolhouse just after lunch. Winnie had the children organized into groups, each with a small basket for collecting their finds. Emma beamed when she saw her father enter the classroom. Pa, you're really here to help. Said I would be, didn't I? Yancy ruffled her hair affectionately. Winnie addressed the class, explaining the purpose of their excursion and the rules they must follow. She assigned Yancy to supervise the youngest group, which included Emma and 4 other children around her age. The afternoon unfolded pleasantly as Winnie led them along a gentle trail beside the creek. The children scampered about, collecting pine cones, interesting stones, colorful leaves that had survived the early frosts, and branches of evergreen for their Thanksgiving decorations. Yancy kept a watchful eye on his group, while occasionally stealing glances at Winnie. She moved gracefully among the children, offering encouragement and identifying their finds with obvious knowledge of the local flora. Her cheeks were flushed from the exercise, and her laughter rang clear in the crisp air whenever a child made a particularly exciting discovery. Pa, look, Emma called, holding up a perfect eagle feather. Can I keep this one for myself instead of using it for the decorations? That's between you and your teacher, Yancy replied. Emma ran to Winnie, who examined the feather with appropriate admiration. This is a special find, Emma. Eagle feathers are considered powerful symbols by many people. If you'd like to keep it, you may. Perhaps you can bring something else for our decorations. Thank you, Miss Turner. Emma carefully tucked the feather into her coat before running off to rejoin her friends. As the children dispersed again, Winnie drifted toward where Yancy stood watching over his charges. She's so much like you, she observed. Everyone says she takes after her mother, Yancy replied, surprised. In appearance, perhaps, but her spirit, that determination, that curiosity about everything that reminds me of you. Winnie's gaze was warm. Thank you for coming today. The children are having a wonderful time. Happy to help, he said, then added more softly, and to spend time with you. The words slipped out before he could consider them, but Winnie's pleased expression eased his momentary embarrassment. Before she could respond, however, a child's cry interrupted them. Miss Turner, Tommy fell in the creek. They hurried toward the commotion to find a boy of about 7 standing knee-deep in the icy water, more startled than hurt. Yancy waded in without hesitation and lifted the boy out, his own boots filling with cold water. Let's get you dried off, young man, Winnie said, wrapping her own shawl around the shivering child. To the rest of the class, she called, Children, gather your baskets. We need to return to the schoolhouse now. The walk back was hurried, with Yancy carrying the wet boy part of the way. At the schoolhouse, Winnie quickly organized the other children to sort their nature finds while she attended to Tommy, providing him with a blanket and sending an older student to fetch his mother. When the immediate crisis had passed, she turned to Yancy with concern. Your boots are soaked through, you'll catch your death. I've weathered worse, he assured her, though his feet were indeed uncomfortably cold. At least sit by the stove while I dismiss the children, she insisted. I have coffee brewing in my quarters. Yancy acquiesced, warming himself by the pot-bellied stove while Winnie handled the end-of-day routines. Emma joined him, proudly showing off her collection of natural treasures. "Miss Turner says we're going to make the prettiest Thanksgiving decorations the town has ever seen," she informed him. "And we're going to have a special lunch next Wednesday before the holiday, and parents can come too. You'll come, won't you, Pa? Wouldn't miss it," Yancy promised. As the last students departed, Winnie approached with a steaming cup of coffee. "Here, this should help warm you." "Thank you." He accepted the cup gratefully. "That boy all right, Tommy?" "Yes, his mother came for him. He was more embarrassed than hurt, I think," she smiled. "You didn't hesitate for a second before going in after him." Yancy shrugged. "Any man would have done the same." "Not any man," Winnie said quietly, her eyes holding his. "You're a good man, Yancy Zeller." Emma, who had been organizing her treasures nearby, looked up with interest at the use of her father's first name. The moment was interrupted by Mrs. Hodgson's arrival to collect Emma. After explaining the afternoon's adventure, Yancy asked if Mrs. Hodgson could take Emma home on her own. "I need to help Miss Turner clean up after our expedition," he explained, ignoring Mrs. Hodgson's knowing look. "Of course," the older woman agreed. "Emma and I will start dinner." "Don't be too late, or your portion will get cold." After they left, a comfortable silence settled over the schoolhouse. Winnie moved about, organizing the children's nature collections while Yancy finished his coffee. "Your boots should be dry enough now," she said eventually. "But I've kept you too long. You must have work waiting at the ranch." "Nothing that can't wait until tomorrow," he replied, rising from his seat by the stove. "Thank you for the coffee and for including me today." "I should be thanking you," Winnie countered. Having another adult along made everything much more manageable. They stood facing each other in the empty classroom, the late afternoon sun slanting through the windows, casting long shadows across the wooden floor. Yancy was acutely aware of how alone they were for the first time since they'd met. "Winnie," he began, uncertain of what he wanted to say but knowing he needed to say something. "I've been meaning to tell you." She waited, her expression open and expectant. "Emma's very fond of you," he continued, losing his nerve. "We both are. You've been good for her for us." "I'm fond of Emma too," Winnie said softly, "and of her father." The simple declaration hung in the air between them. Yancy took a step closer. "I haven't felt this way in a long time," he admitted. "Wasn't sure I ever would again." "Neither was I," Winnie replied. "When I came west, I was looking for a new beginning, a place where I could be useful. I wasn't looking for—" She trailed off. "For what?" Yancy prompted gently. "For someone who would make me wish for more than just purpose in my life." Their eyes held, the meaning clear. Slowly, giving her every chance to step away, Yancy reached for her hand. When she didn't withdraw, he raised it to his lips and pressed a gentle kiss against her knuckles. "I should go," he said reluctantly. "Mrs. Hodgson will be wondering." "Yes," Winnie agreed, though she made no move to reclaim her hand. Finally, Yancy released her and stepped back. "I'll see you at the Thanksgiving lunch. I'll save you a seat," she promised. As Yancy rode home through the gathering dusk, his mind replayed the moments in the schoolhouse. For the first time in 6 years, he allowed himself to imagine a different future, one that included Winnie Turner. The days leading up to Thanksgiving passed in a flurry of activity. The ranch demanded Yancy's attention as he prepared for winter in earnest, but his thoughts frequently strayed to Winnie. The memory of her hand in his, the warmth in her eyes when she spoke of being fond of him, these images sustained him through long hours of physical labor. Emma, meanwhile, was consumed with excitement about the school's Thanksgiving celebration. She spent evenings crafting decorations from her nature finds and practicing a poem she would recite at the event. On the morning of the school luncheon, Yancy took special care with his appearance, donning his best shirt and the vest Sarah had embroidered for him years ago. Emma watched his preparations with obvious approval. "You look handsome, Pa," she declared. "Miss Turner will think so too." Yancy gave her a look of mock sternness. "This isn't about Miss Turner, it's about supporting your school event." "If you say so," Emma replied, clearly unconvinced. When they arrived at the schoolhouse, they found it transformed. The children's nature decorations adorned every surface, and long tables had been arranged in rows, covered with white cloths, and set with plates and utensils borrowed from families throughout town. Parents and siblings were already arriving, creating a festive atmosphere. Winnie greeted them at the door, resplendent in a burgundy dress Yancy hadn't seen before. Her hair was styled more elaborately than usual, with soft curls framing her face. "Emma, would you help Lily finish setting out the name cards?" Winnie asked after welcoming them. As Emma scampered off, Winnie turned to Yancy with a warm smile. "I'm glad you could come. Wouldn't have missed it," he replied honestly. "The place looks remarkable." "The children did most of the work," she said modestly. "Your seat is at the head table with the other parent volunteers." The luncheon was a delightful affair. The food, contributed by families throughout the community, was plentiful and delicious. The children performed songs and recitations they had prepared, with Emma delivering her poem flawlessly, her voice clear and confident. Throughout the meal, Yancy found himself repeatedly catching Winnie's eye across the table. Each glance they shared felt like a private conversation, heightening his awareness of the connection growing between them. After the meal, as parents mingled and children played, Yancy helped Winnie collect empty plates. They worked side by side, their hands occasionally brushing, each contact sending a current of awareness through him. "The luncheon was a great success," he said as they carried stacks of dishes to the wash basin at the back of the room. "Beyond my expectations," Winnie agreed. "The community here is so generous. They appreciate what you're doing for their children," Yancy said. "You've brought something special to Riverbank." Winnie's cheeks colored slightly at the compliment. "I've found something special here, too." Before Yancy could respond, they were interrupted by Mayor Wilson calling for everyone's attention to thank Winnie and the children for the wonderful celebration. The moment passed, but the warmth in Winnie's eyes lingered in Yancy's mind long after they had said their goodbyes. Thanksgiving Day itself was spent quietly at Crosswind Ranch. Mrs. Hodgson prepared a modest feast, and they were joined by two of Yancy's ranch hands who had no family nearby. Emma insisted on using some of her nature decorations for the table, creating a centerpiece that reminded Yancy of the school luncheon. As they ate, Emma regaled everyone with stories about school and Miss Turner, while Mrs. Hodgson exchanged knowing glances with Yancy across the table. After the meal, when the hands had returned to their quarters and Emma was helping Mrs. Hodgson with the dishes, Yancy stepped onto the porch to enjoy a moment of solitude. The evening was clear and cold, stars emerging in the darkening sky. Yancy thought about how much his life had changed in just a few short months. When school had started in September, he had been existing rather than living, focused solely on providing for Emma and maintaining the ranch. Now, he found himself looking forward to each day with a sense of possibility he hadn't felt in years. His thoughts were interrupted by Emma joining him on the porch, wrapped in a woolen blanket against the chill. "What are you thinking about, Pa?" she asked, leaning against him. "Oh, just counting my blessings," he replied, putting his arm around her small shoulders. "I've got a lot to be thankful for." "Like Miss Turner?" Emma suggested innocently. Yancy chuckled. "Among other things, yes. I think she likes you," Emma said confidently. "She smiles different when she talks to you than when she talks to other parents." "Is that so?" Yancy tried to sound casual. "And how does Mrs. Hodgson feel about all this?" "She thinks it's wonderful," Emma declared. "She told me so. She says you've been alone too long and that Miss Turner is just what the doctor ordered." "Did she now?" Yancy made a mental note to have a word with Mrs. Hodgson about discussing such matters with Emma. "Do you love Miss Turner, Pa?" Emma asked suddenly, looking up at him with serious eyes. Yancy considered the question carefully. "I care for her very much," he said finally. "But love, that's a big word, Pumpkin. It takes time." "But you might love her someday." "I might," he acknowledged. "Would that be all right with you?" Emma nodded solemnly. "I think Mama would want you to be happy, and Miss Turner makes you smile again." Yancy hugged his daughter tightly, emotion tightening his throat. "You're pretty wise for a 5-year-old, you know that?" "Almost 6, Emma corrected him importantly. As November gave way to December, the first heavy snow blanketed Riverbank and the surrounding countryside. The journey to town became more challenging. But Yancy was determined not to let the weather interfere with Emma's attendance at school or with his growing relationship with Winnie. The town began preparations for Christmas, with evergreen boughs decorating the storefronts and plans underway for a community celebration at the church. Emma talked constantly about the Christmas program Miss Turner was organizing for the school children to perform. One afternoon in mid-December, as Yancy arrived to collect Emma from school, he found Winnie looking troubled. The children were bundled up against the cold, but Winnie stood on the porch with a worried expression, scanning the horizon where dark clouds were gathering. Everything all right? Yancy asked as he approached. "I'm concerned about the weather," Winnie replied. "That storm looks like it's moving in faster than predicted. Some of the children have quite a distance to travel." Yancy studied the approaching clouds with a rancher's experienced eye. "You're right to be concerned." "That's going to be a bad one," a plan formed quickly in his mind. "I can take some of the children home in my wagon. Those who live the farthest out might need to make a couple of trips." Winnie's relief was evident. "Would you?" "I was about to ask for volunteers among the parents who are here, but many have already left with their own children." Together, they organized the remaining students. Yancy would take 4 children who lived along the same road leading past Crosswind Ranch, while 2 other parents agreed to transport those living in different directions. "Emma, you'll have to wait here with Miss Turner until I return," Yancy explained. "I need to get these children home before the storm hits." Emma nodded bravely, though he could see she was disappointed. "I can help Miss Turner prepare for tomorrow's lessons." "That would be wonderful," Winnie agreed. "We'll be fine, Yancy, just be careful on the roads." The first trip went smoothly, though Yancy could feel the temperature dropping as he delivered each child safely to their home. By the time he returned to town for Emma, fat snowflakes were beginning to fall, and the wind had picked up considerably. When he reached the schoolhouse, he found Winnie and Emma at the windows, watching anxiously for his return. "Thank goodness," Winnie said as he stamped the snow from his boots in the doorway. "I was beginning to worry." "Storm's coming in fast," Yancy confirmed. "We need to get moving if we want to reach Crosswind before the worst hits." Emma gathered her things quickly, but as they prepared to leave, Yancy noticed Winnie's hesitation. "Will you be all right here alone?" he asked, suddenly concerned. The teacher's quarters, though attached to the schoolhouse, were small and isolated. "I'll be fine," Winnie assured him, though her eyes betrayed her unease as she looked out at the thickening snow. "I have plenty of firewood and supplies." Yancy frowned, considering the situation. The storm developing outside had the makings of a blizzard, the kind that could leave people stranded for days. The thought of Winnie alone in the schoolhouse during such conditions troubled him deeply. "You should come with us," he said decisively. "What?" Winnie looked startled, to Crosswind. "You shouldn't be alone during a storm like this. We have plenty of room and Mrs. Hodgson would welcome the company." "I couldn't impose," Winnie began. "It's not an imposition," Yancy interrupted. "It's common sense. Neighbors look out for each other in weather like this." "Please come, Miss Turner," Emma added eagerly. "It'll be like a special holiday." Winnie hesitated, looking between Yancy's determined expression and the increasingly hostile weather outside. "All right," she conceded finally. "Let me gather a few things." While Winnie quickly packed a small valise with essentials, Yancy added extra blankets to the wagon and checked that the horses were properly prepared for the difficult journey ahead. By the time they set out, the snow was falling heavily, reducing visibility to just a few yards ahead. Yancy drove carefully, one arm around Emma to keep her secure, while Winnie sat close on his other side. The 3 of them huddled beneath a heavy buffalo robe for warmth. The journey, which normally took less than an hour, stretched to almost 2 as Yancy navigated the increasingly treacherous road. When they finally arrived at Crosswind Ranch, Mrs. Hodgson met them at the door with evident relief. "I was about to send the hands out looking for you," she exclaimed, ushering them inside where a roaring fire and hot coffee awaited. "The radio's saying this is the worst storm in 10 years. Thought it best to bring Miss Turner along," Yancy explained as they shed their snow-covered outer garments. "Didn't like the idea of her riding out the storm alone at the schoolhouse." "Of course not," Mrs. Hodgson agreed warmly. "You're most welcome, Miss Turner. I've plenty of stew ready, and we can make up the guest room in no time." As they settled around the kitchen table with steaming bowls of stew, the wind howled outside, rattling the windows. Emma, recovered from the cold journey, chattered excitedly about having her teacher visit their home, while Mrs. Hodgson kept Winnie engaged with questions about her life back east. Yancy sat quietly, watching the interactions with a sense of rightness he hadn't expected. Seeing Winnie at his table in his home felt surprisingly natural, as if a missing piece had found its place. After dinner, when Emma had been tucked into bed and Mrs. Hodgson had retired for the night, Yancy and Winnie found themselves alone by the fire in the small but comfortable sitting room. Outside, the storm continued unabated, creating a cocoon of isolation around the ranch house. "Thank you for insisting I come," Winnie said softly, gazing into the flames. "You were right about the storm. Living out here, you develop a sense for these things," Yancy replied. "Glad you agreed to come along. Your home is lovely," she observed, looking around at the simple but well-kept room. "It feels lived in, loved." "Sarah had a knack for making any place feel like home," Yancy said. "After she passed, I tried to keep things as she'd have wanted them." "You've done well," Winnie assured him. "Emma is thriving here. That's a testament to the home you've provided." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the fire crackle and the wind moan around the eaves. Eventually, Winnie spoke again, her voice thoughtful. "May I ask you something personal?" "Of course. Do you ever think about, moving forward, finding happiness again?" She kept her eyes on the fire, not meeting his gaze. Yancy considered the question carefully. "For years, I didn't," he admitted. "Felt like it would be a betrayal somehow. But lately," he paused, gathering his courage. "Lately, I've been thinking that Sarah wouldn't want me to live half a life forever. She'd want Emma to have a complete family again." Now he turned to look directly at Winnie. "And she'd want me to find someone who makes me feel alive again." Winnie's eyes met his, filled with understanding and something more, a warmth that called to him across the space between them. "And have you," she asked softly, "found someone who makes you feel alive again?" Instead of answering with words, Yancy reached across the space between their chairs and took her hand in his. The simple contact seemed to say everything that needed saying. They sat that way for a long while, hands clasped, the firelight playing across their faces, while outside the storm wrapped the ranch in a blanket of white isolation. The blizzard lasted 3 days, effectively cutting off Crosswind Ranch from town. During that time, a new rhythm developed within the household. Winnie seamlessly integrated into their daily routines, helping Mrs. Hodgson with meals, reading stories to Emma, and even assisting Yancy with indoor tasks like repairing tack and taking inventory of supplies. Evenings were spent together by the fire, sometimes playing cards or board games with Emma, sometimes just talking after the child had gone to bed. Each night, Yancy found it increasingly difficult to say goodnight to Winnie at her bedroom door, wanting to prolong their time together. On the morning of the 4th day, they awoke to brilliant sunshine reflecting off pristine snow. The storm had passed, leaving behind nearly 3 feet of accumulation but a clear, intensely blue sky. "The road to town will still be impassable for a day or two," Yancy informed Winnie over breakfast, "but I need to check on the cattle and the outlying pastures." "Can I come, Pa?" Emma asked eagerly. "I want to see the snow drifts, not today, Pumpkin." "Some of those drifts are taller than you are. I'll be riding Rusty and breaking trail. Too dangerous." Emma's face fell with disappointment, but Winnie quickly intervened. "Perhaps you could help me prepare a special lesson for when school resumes. We could plan a unit on winter survival based on what you've learned living on a ranch." Emma brightened immediately at the prospect, and Yancy gave Winnie a grateful look. She had a natural way with his daughter that touched him deeply. After breakfast, as Yancy prepared to ride out, Winnie followed him to the door. "Be careful," she said softly. "The drifts can be treacherous." "I know this land blind," he assured her, "but I appreciate the concern." Their eyes held for a moment, and then, in a move that surprised them both, Winnie stood on tiptoe and pressed a quick kiss to his cheek. "For luck," she explained, her cheeks coloring. The warmth of that brief contact stayed with Yancy throughout his long, cold ride across the snow-covered ranch. He found the cattle huddled in the sheltered areas he had prepared before the storm, most of them weathering the blizzard successfully. There were losses unavoidable in such conditions, but fewer than he had feared. When he returned to the ranch house late in the afternoon, he found Emma and Winnie in the kitchen, flour dusting their aprons as they rolled out dough for apple pies. Mrs. Hodgson sat at the table, peeling more apples and offering occasional guidance. The domestic scene struck Yancy with unexpected force. This was how a home should be: warm, bustling with activity, filled with voices and laughter. For too long, Crosswind had felt only partially alive, existing rather than thriving. Winnie's presence had changed that, awakening possibilities he had thought forever lost. That evening, after Emma was asleep and Mrs. Hodgson had retired, Yancy and Winnie once again found themselves alone by the fire. The past days of shared living had created an ease between them that felt both new and somehow familiar. "The road should be clear enough to travel tomorrow," Yancy said, breaking a comfortable silence. "I can take you back to town in the morning." Winnie nodded, though he thought he detected a flicker of regret in her expression. "I should check on the schoolhouse, and the children will be eager to resume classes." "It's been nice having you here," Yancy said simply. "It's been nice being here," Winnie replied. "Emma is wonderful, and Mrs. Hodgson has been so welcoming." "And what about me?" Yancy asked, surprising himself with his directness. Winnie met his gaze steadily. "You, Yancy Zeller, have been the most wonderful surprise of my life." The honesty of her statement emboldened him. "Winnie, I need to say something, and I'm not much good with words, so I'll just say it plain. These past few days having you here, it's shown me what I've been missing, what Emma's been missing, and I find myself not wanting to take you back to town tomorrow." "What are you saying, Yancy?" Winnie asked softly. He moved to sit beside her on the small sofa, taking both her hands in his. "I'm saying that I care for you, deeply, more than I thought possible, and I'm hoping you might feel something similar." "I do," she whispered, her eyes shining in the firelight. "From almost the first moment we met, I've felt drawn to you in a way I never expected." Relief and joy washed through him. Slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, Yancy leaned forward and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was gentle, questioning at first, but when Winnie's hand came up to rest against his cheek, it deepened into something more profound: a promise, a beginning. When they finally separated, Yancy kept her close, his forehead resting against hers. "I'm not rushing you," he said quietly. "I know this is all happening fast, but I wanted you to know where I stand." "I appreciate your honesty," Winnie replied, "and I feel the same way, but you're right, we should take time to be certain, for Emma's sake, if nothing else." "Agreed," Yancy said, though he felt more certain than he had about anything in years. "But I'd like to start courting you properly if you're amenable." Winnie smiled, her eyes crinkling at the corners. "I'm very amenable, Mr. Zeller." He kissed her again, savoring the newness of it, the promise of a future he hadn't dared imagine until now. The following morning, as promised, Yancy drove Winnie back to town. The journey was easier than he'd expected, as several ranchers had already begun clearing the main road with teams of horses pulling improvised plows. The schoolhouse, when they reached it, stood untouched by the storm, its windows intact and chimney clear. "Looks like everything weathered the blizzard just fine," Yancy observed as he helped Winnie down from the wagon. "Yes, though I'm grateful I didn't have to weather it alone," she replied, squeezing his hand before releasing it. "When will school resume?" he asked, reluctant to leave. "I'll speak with Mayor Wilson, but likely the day after tomorrow, to give families time to clear their own paths." "Then I'll see you then," Yancy said. "Unless, would you consider joining us for Sunday dinner this weekend, Mrs. Hodgson would be delighted, and Emma's already asking when you'll visit again." "I'd love to," Winnie said warmly. As Yancy drove back to Crosswind, he found himself whistling a tune he hadn't thought of in years, a folk song Sarah used to sing while working in the garden. The memory brought a pang, but not the sharp grief he had once known. Instead, he felt a sense of continuity, as if his life was flowing forward again after being frozen for too long. The weeks leading up to Christmas passed in a pleasant blur. School resumed, and the town bustled with preparations for the holiday. Yancy found excuses to visit town more frequently, sometimes bringing small gifts for Winnie, a jar of Mrs. Hodgson's apple preserves, a book he thought she might enjoy, or simply wildflowers he had found sheltered in a sunny corner of the ranch. Their courtship, though conducted with the propriety expected in a small community where the schoolteacher's reputation must remain above reproach, progressed steadily. Sunday dinners at Crosswind became a regular tradition, and occasionally Yancy would escort Winnie to community events in town. Emma watched these developments with undisguised delight, often orchestrating situations that allowed her father and teacher to spend time together. Even Mrs. Hodgson, initially reserved about the growing relationship, had become an enthusiastic supporter, confiding to Yancy one evening that Miss Turner has brought the light back to this house. The school's Christmas program was scheduled for the evening of December 22nd, the last day of classes before the holiday break. For weeks, Emma had been practicing her part as an angel in the nativity scene, while steadfastly refusing to reveal any details to her father. "It's a surprise, Pa," she insisted whenever he asked. "Miss Turner says surprises make Christmas special." On the night of the performance, the church was filled to capacity with families from throughout the area. Yancy sat in the front row, having helped Winnie set up the makeshift stage earlier in the day. The anticipation in the room was palpable as parents whispered excitedly, waiting for the program to begin. Winnie stepped onto the stage to welcome everyone, looking radiant in a deep green dress that complemented her eyes. As she spoke about the hard work the children had put into their performance, her gaze repeatedly found Yancy's, sending a warm current of connection between them despite the crowded room. The program itself was charming, with the youngest children singing carols, followed by older students performing a simplified version of A Christmas Carol. Emma's angel appeared in the nativity scene, her face solemn with concentration as she delivered her lines flawlessly. Yancy felt his chest swell with pride, while beside him, Mrs. Hodgson discreetly dabbed at her eyes. After the performance, as families mingled and enjoyed refreshments, Yancy found himself cornered by Mayor Wilson near the punch bowl. "Zeller," the older man said amiably, "been meaning to have a word with you." Yancy tensed slightly, wondering if the mayor disapproved of his courtship of the town's teacher. "What about Mayor? About Miss Turner," Wilson confirmed, but his expression held no censure. "I've noticed you two have been spending considerable time together." "We have," Yancy acknowledged cautiously. The mayor nodded approvingly. "Good, good, she's a fine woman, best teacher this town's ever had. The children adore her, and she's brought new ideas that have invigorated the entire community." "I agree completely," Yancy said, relaxing somewhat. "Just want you to know," Wilson continued, lowering his voice, "that the town council would look favorably upon any permanent arrangement that might keep her in Riverbank. There was some concern she might only stay a year or two before returning east. Happens with many of the teachers we get out here." Understanding dawned on Yancy. The mayor wasn't warning him off, he was giving tacit approval. "I appreciate you telling me that, Mayor. Just doing my duty to the town," Wilson replied with a wink. "Now, I believe your daughter is looking for you." Emma was indeed weaving through the crowd toward him, still wearing her angel costume complete with wire halo. "Pa, did you like the show?" "Did I do good?" she asked breathlessly. "You were perfect, Pumpkin," he assured her, kneeling to her level. "The best angel I've ever seen." "Miss Turner helped me practice my lines every day," Emma confided. "She says I have a natural talent for the dramatic arts." "Does she now?" Yancy smiled. "And where is Miss Turner? I should congratulate her on a successful program." "She's out back," Emma said. "She said she needed some air because it's hot with all the people. Can I go have cookies with Lily? Her ma brought special ones with sugar on top." "Go ahead," Yancy agreed. "Stay with Mrs. Hodgson. I'll find Miss Turner." He made his way through the crowded church to the small side door that led to a garden area. Outside, the night was clear and cold, stars brilliantly visible against the black sky. Winnie stood alone, her breath forming clouds in the frigid air, her face tilted upward to the heavens. Escaping the adulation, Yancy asked quietly as he approached. She turned, smiling when she saw him. Just taking a moment, it went better than I dared hope. It was wonderful. The children did you proud. He moved to stand beside her, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. Emma was perfect, she was, Winnie agreed. She has a natural confidence that's rare in a child her age. Wonder where she gets that, Yancy mused. Certainly not from her shy, retiring father. Winnie laughed, the sound clear in the still night. No, certainly not from him. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, both looking up at the stars. I have something for you, Yancy said finally. An early Christmas gift. I was going to wait until Sunday dinner, but… He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small package wrapped in brown paper. Winnie took it, her eyes questioning. You didn't have to get me anything. I wanted to, he said simply. Open it. She carefully unwrapped the package to reveal a small wooden box, intricately carved with a pattern of wildflowers. When she opened the lid, a delicate melody began to play. A music box, she breathed. It's beautiful. I carved the box, Yancy explained. The mechanism inside I ordered from Denver. The song is Beautiful Dreamer. I hope you like it. I love it, Winnie said, her eyes shining as she looked up at him. Did you really make this? Spent every evening for weeks on it, he admitted. Had to hide it whenever you visited. Emma was sworn to secrecy. It's the most thoughtful gift I've ever received. She closed the box carefully and held it against her heart. Thank you, Yancy. In the starlight, her eyes held a depth of emotion that took his breath away. Without thinking, he leaned forward and kissed her, his hand coming up to cup her cheek. Unlike their previous kisses, which had been gentle and tentative, this one carried a certainty, a declaration of feelings too strong to be contained. When they finally parted, Yancy kept her close, his arm around her waist. I'm falling in love with you, Winnie Turner, he said quietly. Thought you should know. That's fortunate, she replied, her voice slightly breathless, because I've already fallen in love with you, Yancy Zeller. The admission, spoken aloud for the first time, seemed to change something tangible in the air between them. The future, which had once seemed a flat, endless plane of duty and responsibility to Yancy, now rose before him like the mountains at dawn, full of possibility and promise. We should go back inside, Winnie said eventually. People will wonder where we've gone. Let them wonder, Yancy replied, but he released her, knowing she was right. As the town's teacher, Winnie had to maintain propriety, especially at a school function. As they returned to the warmth and light of the church, Emma spotted them immediately and came running over, her wire halo slightly askew. There you are. Mrs. Wilson is looking for you, Miss Turner. She says everyone wants to congratulate you on the program. I'll be right there, Winnie promised. To Yancy, she added in a lower voice, Sunday dinner, we'll expect you at noon, he confirmed. As she moved away to fulfill her social obligations, Emma looked up at her father with a knowing expression. Did you give her the present? I did, Yancy acknowledged. How did you know? I saw you put it in your pocket before we left home, Emma explained. Did she like it? She loved it, Yancy assured her, his hand unconsciously touching his lips where the warmth of Winnie's kiss still lingered. Good, Emma said decisively. Because I already told her she should come live with us forever. Yancy nearly choked. You what? At school yesterday, Emma continued calmly. I told her that Mrs. Hodgson says she's never seen you so happy, and that I think she should marry you and be my new mother, because my real mother is in heaven and can't come back, but she would want me to have a mother here on earth. Mortification washed over Yancy. Emma, we've talked about this. Some things are private family matters. But Miss Turner is going to be family, Emma pointed out with irrefutable child's logic. So I can tell her family matters. What? What did Miss Turner say? Yancy asked, curiosity overcoming his embarrassment. Emma's face brightened. She said that would be a decision for grown-ups to make, but that she cares for both of us very much, and that she's honored I would want her for a mother. A wave of relief, followed by profound gratitude for Winnie's graceful handling of such an awkward situation, washed over Yancy. That was a kind response, he acknowledged. But Emma, please don't put Miss Turner in such an uncomfortable position again. These things take time. But you do want to marry her, don't you? Emma pressed, undeterred. Yancy glanced across the room to where Winnie stood surrounded by admiring parents, her face animated as she discussed the children's performance. "Yes," he admitted quietly. "Someday if she'll have me, but that's between Miss Turner and me." "Fine," Emma sighed dramatically. "But don't take too long, Pa. I'm not getting any younger." Yancy stifled a laugh at his daughter's precocious statement. "I'll keep that in mind." Christmas Day dawned clear and cold at Crosswind Ranch. Yancy awoke early, as was his habit, but instead of immediately rising to tend to the animals, he allowed himself a few moments to lie in bed, contemplating the changes in his life over the past few months. The previous day, Christmas Eve, had been spent with Winnie joining them for a special dinner and evening of caroling and gift exchange. She had presented Emma with a beautiful illustrated edition of Fairy Tales, and Mrs. Hodgson with an exquisite lace collar she had ordered from back east. For Yancy, she had selected a fine leather-bound journal, explaining that she thought he might enjoy recording his thoughts and observations about ranch life. "For a man of few words, you have much worth saying," she had told him quietly as he examined the gift. Now, on Christmas morning, Yancy listened to the familiar sounds of his home, Emma's excited whispers to Mrs. Hodgson in the kitchen, the crackle of the fire being stoked in the main room, the distant lowing of cattle in the barn. The ranch felt alive in a way it hadn't in years, as if the very walls had absorbed the joy and laughter of recent weeks. After a festive breakfast, during which Emma could barely contain her excitement about opening the presents beneath the small pine tree in the sitting room, the day unfolded in a pleasant rhythm of gift-giving, cooking, and simple enjoyment of each other's company. By early afternoon, as Mrs. Hodgson bustled in the kitchen preparing the Christmas feast, and Emma played contentedly with her new toys, Yancy found himself drawn to the quiet of the porch. The day was milder than usual for late December, the sun casting long shadows across the snow-covered yard. As he stood contemplating the peaceful scene, the sound of approaching hoofbeats drew his attention. A rider was coming up the long drive to the ranch house, a familiar figure on a chestnut mare. Winnie had mentioned she might visit briefly in the afternoon if the weather permitted, but seeing her actually approaching, her hair gleaming in the winter sunlight, filled Yancy with unexpected joy. He stepped off the porch to meet her as she rode into the yard, her cheeks flushed from the cold air and exertion. "Merry Christmas," she called as she drew near. "Merry Christmas," he returned, moving to help her dismount. "Wasn't sure you'd make it out today." "I couldn't stay away," she admitted as her feet touched the ground. It didn't feel right, being alone on Christmas. Before he could respond, the front door burst open and Emma came flying out, still in her Christmas dress. "Miss Turner, you came. Did you bring more presents?" "Emma," Yancy admonished. "That's not polite," Winnie laughed. "It's all right. And yes, Emma, I did bring something else for you, but it's not wrapped like a regular present." She reached into her saddlebag and pulled out a small bundle of what appeared to be dried flowers and greenery. "What is it?" Emma asked, curiosity overcoming her momentary disappointment. "These are special flowers and herbs I collected last summer and dried," Winnie explained, kneeling to Emma's level. "My grandmother taught me how to preserve them. I thought perhaps you might like to learn how to braid them into a crown or hair decoration." Emma's eyes widened with delight. "Yes, can we do it now?" "Let's give Miss Turner a chance to warm up first," Yancy suggested, taking the reins of Winnie's horse. "You run tell Mrs. Hodgson we have company for dinner while I stable Penny here." "All right, but hurry," Emma called over her shoulder as she dashed back to the house. Alone momentarily, Yancy turned to Winnie with a smile. "You didn't have to ride all this way." "I wanted to," she replied simply. "Christmas should be spent with those you love." The word hung in the air between them, acknowledged but still new enough to cause Yancy's heart to beat faster whenever he heard it. "Come on," he said, offering his arm. "Let's get you inside before you freeze. I'll take care of your horse after." In the warm kitchen, Mrs. Hodgson greeted Winnie with genuine pleasure, insisting she sit by the fire with a cup of hot cider while final dinner preparations continued. Emma hovered nearby, eyeing the bundle of dried flowers with anticipation. "Can we make the flower crown now, Miss Turner, please?" "Yes, let's," Winnie agreed, setting aside her cup. Bring me a bowl of water to soften the stems a bit, and we'll get started. Emma dashed to comply, returning moments later with a small bowl of water. Winnie spread a cloth on the table and began arranging the dried blooms and herbs. These are lavender, sage, and yarrow, she explained, pointing to each. And these little white flowers are baby's breath. They hold their shape and color beautifully when dried. As Yancy watched, Winnie patiently showed Emma how to select stems of similar length, soak them briefly to make them pliable, and then weave them together in a simple braid. Emma's face was a study in concentration as she attempted to mimic her teacher's deft movements. Like this. Emma asked, holding up her first attempt a somewhat lopsided but recognizable braid of flowers. That's perfect for your first try, Winnie encouraged. Now we can shape it into a circle for a crown or keep it as a straight braid to weave into your hair. I want it in my hair like yours, Emma decided, eyeing Winnie's neatly pinned curls. All right then. Winnie shifted in her chair to face Emma properly. I'll braid your hair first and then we'll incorporate the flowers. With gentle hands, Winnie undid Emma's existing braids and began combing through the dark strands with her fingers. As she worked, she hummed softly, a Christmas carol that blended with the domestic sounds of Mrs. Hodgson's cooking and the crackling fire. Yancy, leaning against the doorframe, was struck by the tableau before him, Winnie and Emma with their heads close together, the older woman's hands moving skillfully through his daughter's hair, Emma's face serene with contentment. It was a moment of such simple intimacy, such quiet joy, that he felt his throat tighten with emotion when Winnie finished. Emma had two neat braids with the dried flowers woven throughout, adding touches of color to her dark hair. A few sprigs of lavender had been tucked at the crown, giving off a subtle fragrance when Emma moved. There, Winnie said, sitting back to admire her work. Now you're as pretty as a spring meadow. Emma ran to the small mirror hanging by the door to admire her reflection. Pa, look. Aren't the flowers beautiful? Miss Turner says they'll stay like this for days if I'm careful. You look lovely, Yancy assured her. Like a woodland fairy. Emma twirled, delighted with the effect. Now I'm part of the ranch too, just like the wildflowers that grow in the south pasture. That's right, Winnie agreed, gathering the remaining dried stems. Now you're part of the natural beauty of Crosswind. No, Emma said firmly, shaking her head. I meant that now I'm part of the ranch like Miss Turner will be. Because these are her special flowers, and she taught me how to use them, so now we're all connected to the ranch together. The innocent statement hung in the air. Mrs. Hodgson busied herself with the stove, hiding a smile while Yancy felt heat rise in his face. Winnie recovered first. Well, the flowers certainly connect us to the land and its cycles. That's a lovely way of thinking about it, Emma. Emma, oblivious to the adult's discomfort, continued happily, Mrs. Hodgson says you'll probably move to the ranch after the school year ends anyway, so it's like the flowers are welcoming you early. Emma, Yancy finally found his voice. That's enough speculation about things that aren't your concern, but Emma was undeterred. But Pa, you said at breakfast that your Christmas wish was Emma. Yancy interrupted more firmly. Why don't you go set the dining table for dinner? Mrs. Hodgson could use your help. With a dramatic sigh that only a 5-year-old could muster, Emma complied, followed quickly by Mrs. Hodgson, who gave Yancy an apologetic glance as she ushered the child from the kitchen. Left alone with Winnie, Yancy ran a hand through his hair in embarrassment. I'm sorry about that. Emma has an active imagination, and Mrs. Hodgson shouldn't be discussing such things with her. Winnie's eyes held amusement rather than offense. And what exactly was your Christmas wish, Mr. Zeller? I find myself curious now. Yancy hesitated, then decided honesty was the only path forward. My wish was for the future to be as promising as the present has become since you entered our lives. That's a diplomatic answer, Winnie observed, her eyes twinkling, but I suspect Emma was about to reveal something more specific. Perhaps, Yancy acknowledged. But some wishes should be kept private until the right moment. Winnie stepped closer, her hand coming to rest lightly on his arm. And when might the right moment be? The air between them seemed to thicken with possibility. Yancy was acutely aware of her nearness, the subtle scent of lavender that clung to her from handling the dried flowers, the warmth of her hand through his sleeve. "Soon," he promised, his voice low. "When I can be sure it's not just my wish, but yours as well." Her eyes softened. "Yancy Zeller, for a man of few words, you occasionally say exactly the right thing." Before he could respond, Mrs. Hodgson called from the dining room that dinner was ready to be served. The moment passed, but the promise in Winnie's eyes lingered in Yancy's mind throughout the Christmas feast that followed. The remainder of the holiday season passed in a pleasant blur of community gatherings, quiet evenings by the fire, and increasing closeness between Yancy and Winnie. Though nothing was officially declared, their courtship progressed steadily, with Winnie becoming a regular presence at Crosswind Ranch on weekends and holidays. As January turned to February, and winter maintained its grip on the Colorado territory, Yancy found himself planning for the future with a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. The upcoming spring would bring new calves, the planting of the kitchen garden, repairs to fences damaged by winter storms, and he hoped, a significant change in his personal life. One evening in mid-February, after Emma had been tucked into bed, Yancy sat at the kitchen table with Mrs. Hodgson, who was mending a shirt by lamplight. The older woman had been uncharacteristically quiet during dinner, and Yancy sensed she had something on her mind. "Everything all right, Mrs. Hodgson?" he asked finally. "You seem preoccupied tonight." She set down her sewing and regarded him seriously. "I've been thinking, Mr. Zeller, about the future." "What about it?" "About Miss Turner," Mrs. Hodgson clarified, "and your intentions toward her." Yancy tensed slightly. "My intentions are honorable, if that's your concern." "Of course they are," Mrs. Hodgson dismissed the notion with a wave. "What I'm wondering is when you plan to make those intentions official. Spring will be here before we know it, and Miss Turner will need to inform the school board of her plans for the next academic year." "I'm aware of that," Yancy acknowledged. "The way I see it, Mrs. Hodgson continued pragmatically, you have two options. Either she continues teaching and commutes from here once you're married, or she gives up teaching to become a full-time rancher's wife and mother to Emma." Yancy blinked, taken aback by Mrs. Hodgson's direct approach to a subject he'd been contemplating more cautiously. "You're getting ahead of things. I haven't even asked her to marry me yet." "But you plan to," Mrs. Hodgson stated rather than asked. "Yes," Yancy admitted, "when the time is right." "And when might that be?" The older woman pressed. "Because if I'm to plan for the changes that will come with a new mistress of Crosswind, I'd appreciate some notice." It dawned on Yancy that Mrs. Hodgson wasn't simply being nosy, she was considering her own future. For 6 years, she had effectively run the household, caring for Emma and managing domestic matters while Yancy focused on the ranch. "Mrs. Hodgson," he said gently, "you know you'll always have a place here, regardless of any changes in my personal life. Emma adores you, and the ranch wouldn't function half as well without your steady hand." The older woman's expression softened. "That's kind of you to say, but we both know things will change, as they should. Emma needs a mother and you need a wife. Miss Turner is perfect for both roles." "And what about you?" Yancy asked. "What do you need?" Mrs. Hodgson looked surprised by the question, as if no one had considered her needs in a long time. "I need to be useful," she said after a moment's thought. "To contribute. I'm not ready for the rocking chair just yet." "Then we'll ensure you remain an essential part of Crosswind," Yancy promised. "If when Winnie becomes part of this family, the three of you will determine together how the household should run." Relief washed across Mrs. Hodgson's features. "Thank you. That's all I needed to know." She picked up her sewing again, then added without looking up, "And Mr. Zeller, spring is a lovely time for a wedding." Yancy couldn't help but smile at the not-so-subtle hint. "I'll keep that in mind." The conversation with Mrs. Hodgson catalyzed Yancy into action. The following day, he rode into town on the pretext of ordering supplies, but with another purpose in mind. After completing his business at the general store, he made his way to the small jewelry shop that also served as the town's watchmaker. Mr. Levin, the elderly proprietor, greeted him with surprise. "Mr. Zeller, don't believe I've seen you in my shop before." "First time for everything," Yancy replied, removing his hat as he entered the small, meticulously organized space. "I'm looking for a ring, a special one." Understanding dawned in the older man's eyes. Ah, for the schoolteacher, perhaps, word travels in a small town. Rather than being annoyed at the gossip, Yancy found himself oddly pleased that his relationship with Winnie was considered common knowledge. Yes, for Miss Turner. Then you'll want something elegant but practical, Mr. Levin said decisively, moving to a glass case at the side of the shop. A teacher needs to use her hands, after all. He unlocked the case and carefully laid out several rings on a velvet cloth. These came in from Denver last month. The latest styles, but nothing too ostentatious. Yancy examined each option carefully. Most seemed either too elaborate or too plain for Winnie. He was about to ask if there were other choices when Mr. Levin held up one he had overlooked. This one, the jeweler suggested. Gold band with a small sapphire flanked by two smaller diamonds, elegant but sturdy enough for daily wear. The ring caught the light, the deep blue stone reminding Yancy of Winnie's eyes when she laughed. "It's perfect," he said, knowing immediately it was the right choice. "How much?" The price was steep but not beyond his means, especially after the successful cattle sale the previous autumn. They settled on a figure, and Mr. Levin carefully placed the ring in a small velvet box. "Best wishes, Mr. Zeller," the jeweler said as he handed over the package. "Miss Turner is a fortunate woman." "I'm the fortunate one," Yancy replied honestly. With the ring secured in his inner pocket, Yancy completed his errands in town, deliberately avoiding the schoolhouse. He wanted no chance encounters with Winnie before he had formulated his plan. The opportunity presented itself sooner than he expected. The following Sunday, as Winnie joined them for dinner at Crosswind, she mentioned that school would be closed the next Friday for a teachers' conference in the county seat. "The other rural school teachers and I will meet to discuss curriculum and teaching methods," she explained. "But I've decided not to attend." "Why not?" Yancy asked, surprised. Winnie usually embraced professional development opportunities. The journey would require an overnight stay, and with the spring thaw making the roads unpredictable, it seemed wiser to remain in Riverbank. "I'll receive notes on the proceedings later." An idea formed in Yancy's mind. "If you have the day free, perhaps you'd like to ride out to the south pasture with me. There's a spot there I've been wanting to show you, a hidden meadow with the first wildflowers of the season." "That sounds lovely," Winnie agreed readily. "I'd enjoy seeing more of Crosswind." Emma, listening to this exchange, exchanged a knowing look with Mrs. Hodgson. "Can I come too, Pa?" Before Yancy could formulate a response that wouldn't reveal his plans, Mrs. Hodgson intervened smoothly. "Emma, I was hoping you'd help me that day. Remember how you've been asking to learn to make my special apple dumplings? Friday would be perfect for that." Emma hesitated, clearly torn between the ride with her father and teacher and the promised cooking lesson. "The meadow will still be there another day," Winnie assured her. "And I would love to taste those apple dumplings when we return." This settled the matter, and Emma agreed to the arrangement, though Yancy suspected she and Mrs. Hodgson had their own ideas about why he wanted time alone with Winnie. The week passed slowly for Yancy, each day building his anticipation for Friday. He checked the meadow twice to ensure the early spring wildflowers were indeed beginning to bloom, and he spent evenings rehearsing what he would say when the moment came. Friday dawned clear and mild, a perfect early March day with the promise of spring in the air. Yancy had the horses saddled and ready when Winnie arrived at Crosswind mid-morning, dressed in a practical riding outfit, but with her hair arranged more carefully than usual beneath her hat. "You look lovely," Yancy said as he helped her mount the gentle mare he had selected for her. "Thank you," she replied with a smile that suggested she had taken special care with her appearance. "Where exactly are we going?" "It's about an hour's ride," he explained, swinging into his own saddle. "To the southernmost part of Crosswind, where the foothills begin. There's a sheltered valley there that gets the first wildflowers every spring." They rode at a leisurely pace, Yancy pointing out features of the ranch along the way, the best grazing areas, the creek that never ran dry even in drought years, the stands of pine that provided shelter for wildlife and occasionally timber for repairs. Winnie listened with evident interest, asking thoughtful questions about the operation of the ranch. "You've created something remarkable here," she observed as they paused atop a small rise overlooking a broad pasture where cattle grazed. "This land is thriving under your care." It wasn't just me, Yancy admitted. Sarah had a vision for Crosswind too, and lately I've been thinking about new possibilities, improvements we could make, ways to ensure its future. "What sort of improvements?" Winnie asked, her expression curious. "Expanding the herd, for one. Maybe adding some crops beyond what we grow for our own use. Emma will need educational opportunities as she grows older, perhaps college someday, if she's inclined that way." "Those sound like good plans," Winnie said. "Thinking of the future is important." "That's actually what I wanted to talk with you about today," Yancy said, guiding his horse forward. "But let's reach our destination first." They continued riding, leaving the open pastures behind and entering more rugged terrain where the plains began to rise toward distant mountains. Finally, Yancy led them down a narrow trail that wound between rocky outcroppings. "It's just through here," he said, ducking beneath a low-hanging branch. "Watch your head." The trail opened suddenly into a secluded meadow, sheltered on three sides by rocky walls and open to the south, capturing the warm spring sunshine. As Yancy had hoped, the meadow was coming alive with early wildflowers, delicate white snowdrops, bright yellow buttercups, and the first purple crocuses pushing through the winter brown grass. "Oh," Winnie exclaimed, her face lighting with delight. "It's beautiful, like a secret garden." They dismounted, and Yancy tied the horses in a shady spot where they could graze on the fresh spring grass. He had packed a small lunch, which he now retrieved from his saddlebag. "I thought we could picnic here," he suggested, spreading a blanket on a dry patch of ground. "This is wonderful," Winnie said, settling on the blanket. "How did you find this place?" "Stumbled upon it my first year here," Yancy explained, arranging their simple meal of bread, cheese, and Mrs. Hodgson's preserves. "I was checking fence lines and got a bit turned around in a storm. Took shelter in those rocks, and when the rain cleared, found myself looking out at this meadow in full bloom. Been a special place for me ever since." They ate companionably, the conversation flowing easily between them as it always did. Yancy found himself repeatedly distracted by the way the sunlight caught in Winnie's hair, turning the chestnut strands to gold, and by the animation in her expression as she described her plans for the school's spring activities. When they had finished eating, Winnie stood and walked among the wildflowers, bending occasionally to examine a particularly beautiful bloom. Yancy watched her, his hand unconsciously touching the small box in his pocket. "Winnie," he called, his voice steady despite the sudden racing of his heart. "There's something I want to say." She turned toward him, her expression curious but somehow expectant, as if she sensed the importance of the moment. "Yes." Yancy crossed the meadow to stand before her, taking both her hands in his. "I brought you here today because this place represents something to me, possibility, beauty emerging after the harshest season. For years after Sarah died, I felt like I was living in an endless winter. Then you came to Riverbank and spring returned to my life." Winnie's eyes glistened as she listened, her hands warm in his. "I love you," Yancy continued, the words coming easily now. "And not just me, Emma loves you too. You've brought joy back to Crosswind in ways I never thought possible." He released one of her hands to reach into his pocket, withdrawing the small velvet box. Winnie's breath caught as he opened it, revealing the sapphire ring nestled within. "I'm asking if you would consider joining our family permanently," Yancy said, his voice steady despite the emotion behind the words. "Would you marry me, Winnie? Become Emma's mother and my wife and make Crosswind your home?" Tears spilled onto Winnie's cheeks, but her smile was radiant. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will marry you, Yancy. Nothing would make me happier." His hands trembled slightly as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, the blue stone catching the sunlight like a captured piece of sky. "It's beautiful," Winnie said, admiring it through her tears. "Not half as beautiful as you," Yancy replied, drawing her close and kissing her with all the love and promise he felt for their future together. When they finally separated, Winnie rested her head against his chest, her arms around his waist. "When shall we tell Emma?" "Tonight," Yancy decided. "Though I suspect she and Mrs. Hodgson already have their suspicions about today's outing," Winnie laughed. Emma has been dropping rather obvious hints about how wonderful it would be if I lived at Crosswind permanently. Just yesterday, she asked if I would like to have the bedroom next to hers or prefer the one across the hall from yours. That child, Yancy groaned, though he couldn't help smiling. Subtle she is not. She's perfect, Winnie said softly, and I can't wait to be her mother officially. They spent another hour in the meadow, gathering a small bouquet of wildflowers to bring back to the ranch and discussing their plans for the future. Winnie would finish the school year, of course, but they agreed on a June wedding, giving them the summer to adjust to their new family arrangement before the next school term began. I'll need to decide about teaching, Winnie mused as they prepared to leave the meadow. The commute from Crosswind is manageable in good weather, but winter would be challenging. Whatever you decide, I'll support, Yancy assured her. If teaching brings you joy, we'll make it work. If you prefer to focus on the ranch and Emma, that's fine too. Crosswind can use your talents either way. The ride back to the ranch seemed shorter, filled as it was with shared plans and occasional stops to steal kisses away from prying eyes. As they approached the ranch house, they could see Emma watching for them from the porch, Mrs. Hodgson beside her. "They're back," Emma shouted, running down the steps to meet them. "Did you see the wildflowers? Did you have a nice picnic?" "We did," Yancy confirmed, dismounting and helping Winnie down from her horse. "And we have something important to tell you." Emma's eyes widened with anticipation. "What is it?" Winnie knelt to Emma's level, holding out her hand to show the ring. "Your father has asked me to marry him, and I've said yes. If it's all right with you, I'll be coming to live at Crosswind permanently." For a moment, Emma stared at the ring, then at Winnie's face, then at her father. Then she let out a whoop of joy and threw her arms around Winnie's neck. "Yes, yes, I knew it. I told Mrs. Hodgson you would say yes. This is the best day ever." Mrs. Hodgson approached more sedately, but her smile was wide as she embraced first Winnie, then Yancy. "Congratulations to you both. It's a blessing for Crosswind and for all of us." Emma was already bubbling with questions and suggestions. "When will the wedding be? Can I be the flower girl? Will you wear a white dress like in the pictures? Can we decorate the whole house with wildflowers?" "Slow down, pumpkin," Yancy laughed. "We've only just gotten engaged. There's plenty of time to plan the details." "But not too much time," Emma insisted. "I've been waiting forever for this." The adults laughed at her impatience, and Yancy felt a surge of gratitude for his precocious, loving daughter who had somehow known exactly what their family needed before he had fully realized it himself. That evening, after a celebratory dinner during which Emma could barely eat for excitement, Yancy and Winnie sat on the porch swing while Emma helped Mrs. Hodgson with the dishes inside. The spring evening was mild, with the first stars beginning to appear in the deepening blue sky. "Happy?" Yancy asked, his arm around Winnie's shoulders. "More than I ever thought possible," she replied, leaning against him. "When I came west seeking a new beginning, I never imagined finding a family and a home like this." "When I saw you that first day in the general store," Yancy admitted, "something told me you would change my life. I just didn't know how completely." Winnie turned the ring on her finger, watching it catch the last light of day. "I should write to my parents tomorrow. They'll be surprised I've mentioned you in my letters, but they don't know how serious things have become." "Will they approve?" Yancy asked, suddenly concerned. They might have had different expectations for their daughter than a widowed rancher with a young child. "They'll approve of my happiness," Winnie said confidently. "And once they meet you and Emma, they'll understand why I've chosen this life." She paused, then added, "I'd like to invite them to the wedding if that's all right. They might not be able to make the journey, but I want them to know they're welcome." "Of course," Yancy agreed immediately. "I want to meet the people who raised such an extraordinary woman." The front door opened, and Emma emerged, now dressed in her nightgown with her hair freshly braided for bed. "Pa, will you and Miss Turner, Mama Winnie, both read me a story tonight?" Winnie's eyes filled with tears at Emma's use of the maternal title. "I would love to, Emma." Yancy's heart swelled as he watched his daughter take Winnie's hand and lead her inside to the small bedroom where Emma's books were neatly arranged on a shelf. In that moment, He knew with absolute certainty that the future stretching before them would be richer and more joyful than he had dared to imagine during those dark years of grief. Later, after Emma had fallen asleep and Mrs. Hodgson had retired for the night, Yancy walked Winnie to her horse for the ride back to town, one of the last such journeys she would need to make before Crosswind became her permanent home. "It won't be long now," he said as he helped her mount. "A few more months and you'll never have to leave again." "I can hardly wait," she replied, leaning down from the saddle to kiss him goodnight. "But for now, I'd better get back before it's fully dark." "I'll see you on Sunday," Yancy promised. "We can begin making wedding plans then." He stood in the yard watching until Winnie disappeared down the road toward town, then turned back to the house, the home that would soon be complete with her presence. Spring progressed rapidly at Crosswind Ranch, bringing new calves, fresh green growth in the pastures, and an increasing profusion of wildflowers that Emma insisted on gathering daily as practice for the wedding decorations. The news of Yancy and Winnie's engagement spread quickly through Riverbank, met with universal approval, and more than a little self-congratulation from those who claimed to have predicted the match from the beginning. Preparations for the June wedding occupied much of their free time. Winnie ordered a simple but elegant white dress from Denver, while Emma became obsessed with her role as flower girl, practicing her solemn walk daily under Mrs. Hodgson's patient guidance. Yancy, for his part, focused on preparing Crosswind for its new mistress, making repairs and improvements to the house that had long been postponed. To Winnie's delight, her parents wrote that they would indeed make the journey from Massachusetts for the wedding. "They're curious about the West," she told Yancy as they sat on the porch one evening in late May. "Father has always wanted to see the mountains, and Mother says she won't miss her only daughter's wedding, no matter how far she has to travel." The weeks leading up to the wedding passed in a blur of activity. The small church in Riverbank was decorated with wildflowers and evergreen boughs, and it seemed the entire community was involved in some aspect of the preparations. Mrs. Wilson organized a group of women to prepare the wedding feast, while Mayor Wilson insisted on providing the finest wines available in the territory. The day before the wedding, Winnie's parents arrived on the stagecoach, tired from their long journey but eager to meet the man their daughter had chosen. Mr. Turner, a dignified gentleman with Winnie's intelligent eyes, shook Yancy's hand firmly and declared himself satisfied after a brief but pointed conversation about Yancy's plans for the future and his commitment to Winnie's happiness. Mrs. Turner, a gentle woman who clearly adored her daughter, won Emma's heart immediately by presenting her with a small locket containing a piece of lace from Winnie's christening gown, to carry tomorrow as you officially become a family. The wedding day itself dawned clear and perfect, as if nature had conspired to bless the union. Emma woke at dawn, too excited to sleep, and insisted on helping with every detail of preparation. By mid-morning, the ranch was bustling with activity as Mrs. Hodgson prepared a light meal for the wedding party before they departed for town. When it was time to leave for the church, Yancy found himself unexpectedly emotional. He stood in the yard, watching as Emma twirled in her new dress, her hair adorned with the small wildflower crown she and Winnie had made the previous evening. 6 years of loneliness were ending today. His daughter would have a mother again, and he would have a partner to share in the joys and challenges of life at Crosswind. The ceremony itself was simple but deeply moving. As Winnie walked down the aisle on her father's arm, Yancy felt his breath catch at her beauty. Her dress was elegant in its simplicity, and she wore wildflowers in her hair, echoing the crown atop Emma's dark curls. Emma preceded her, scattering petals with such concentration that several guests chuckled softly at her seriousness. When it came time to exchange vows, Yancy spoke from his heart, promising to love and cherish Winnie for all the days of his life. Winnie's voice was clear and strong as she made the same promises in return, her eyes never leaving his. After the minister pronounced them husband and wife, and Yancy had kissed his bride to the cheers and applause of the assembled guests, Emma darted forward from her place beside Mrs. Hodgson. "We're a real family now," she declared, wrapping her arms around both adults, just like I wished for. The celebration that followed at the town hall was joyous and lasted well into the evening. There was dancing and feasting, speeches and toasts, and much advice offered to the newlyweds, some practical, and some causing Winnie to blush prettily. As the party continued, Yancy and Winnie found a moment alone on the small balcony overlooking the town square. The evening was perfect, with a gentle breeze carrying the scent of early summer flowers. "Happy, Mrs. Zeller?" Yancy asked, still marveling at being able to call Winnie by his name. "Completely," she assured him, her eyes reflecting the stars above. "I never imagined such happiness was possible." "Nor did I," Yancy admitted. "After Sarah died, I thought that part of my life was over forever." "She'll always be part of your heart," Winnie said gently, "and part of Emma." "I would never wish to change that." "I know," Yancy said, drawing her close. "That's one of the reasons I love you so much." Their moment of privacy was interrupted by Emma, who had been searching for them. "There you are, Mrs. Wilson is cutting the cake, and she says the bride and groom have to be there." Hand in hand, they followed Emma back to the celebration, greeting well-wishers and accepting congratulations as they moved through the crowded hall. The rest of the evening passed in a happy blur of festivities until, as twilight deepened into night, it was time to depart. The newlyweds would spend their first night as husband and wife at Crosswind, with Emma staying in town with Mrs. Hodgson and the Turners. In a week, after a short honeymoon trip to Denver, they would begin their new life together as a family. As they drove away from town in the wagon festooned with ribbons and flowers by well-meaning friends, Winnie nestled against Yancy's side. "It seems like a dream," she murmured. "A beautiful dream I never want to wake from." "Not a dream," Yancy assured her, pressing a kiss to her temple. "A new beginning." The journey to Crosswind passed in comfortable silence, both of them absorbing the reality of their new status. When they arrived at the ranch house, now officially Winnie's home, Yancy lifted her from the wagon and carried her across the threshold in the traditional manner. "Welcome home, Mrs. Zeller," he said, setting her gently on her feet in the front hall. "Now and forever." Epilogue. 1 year later, the summer afternoon was warm and still. The only sounds the distant lowing of cattle and the gentle creak of the porch swing where Winnie sat, a small bundle cradled in her arms. At 4 weeks old, Thomas Zeller was a perfect blend of his parents Yancy's strong chin and Winnie's expressive eyes. From the meadow beyond the front yard came the sound of laughter as Emma, now 7, played a game of tag with her cousins who were visiting from Massachusetts. Winnie smiled, watching her stepdaughter dart between the wildflowers that carpeted the grass in vibrant patches of color. The past year had brought many changes to Crosswind Ranch. Shortly after the wedding, Winnie had made the difficult decision to resign from her teaching position, feeling that her place was at the ranch with her new family. The school board had been disappointed but understanding, especially when they learned a few months later that Winnie was expecting. The pregnancy had been relatively easy, with Emma taking on the role of protective older sister from the moment the news was announced. Mrs. Hodgson, contrary to her earlier concerns about being displaced, had flourished in her role as honorary grandmother, teaching Winnie the domestic skills specific to ranch life, while deferring to her as the new mistress of Crosswind. Yancy emerged from the barn, his hat pushed back on his head as he strode toward the house. Even after a year of marriage, the sight of him still made Winnie's heart beat faster. He had grown in confidence and happiness over the months, laughing more easily and speaking more openly about his hopes and plans for their future. "How are my favorite people?" he asked, climbing the porch steps and bending to press a kiss to Winnie's forehead before gently touching his son's downy head. "We're perfect," Winnie assured him. "Thomas just ate and fell asleep, and Emma is entertaining her cousins with stories about the ranch." Yancy settled beside her on the swing, his arm naturally finding its place around her shoulders. "Your parents seem to be enjoying their visit." "They are. Father is particularly impressed with your breeding program for the cattle. I think he's considering investing in a small herd of his own back east." "Your father a cattle rancher," Yancy chuckled. Now that's something I never expected. The West changes people, Winnie observed, leaning against her husband's solid warmth. Look how it changed me from a proper Boston schoolteacher to a rancher's wife with dirt under my fingernails and a baby on my hip. Do you ever regret it? Yancy asked, his voice serious. Giving up teaching, moving to the ranch, not for a moment, Winnie assured him without hesitation. I still get to teach Emma and someday Thomas, and the ranch hands children who come for lessons twice a week. But now I have a family and a home that's truly mine. What more could I want? Their conversation was interrupted by Emma running up to the porch, her face flushed with exertion and happiness. In her hands, she carried a tangled bunch of wildflowers she had gathered. Mama Winnie, look what I found in the meadow. Can I braid them into your hair like we did for the wedding? Of course, Winnie agreed, shifting Thomas in her arms to make room for Emma on the swing between her and Yancy. Your brother is sleeping soundly, so this is the perfect time. With gentle fingers, Emma began separating the flowers and arranging them for braiding. Her skill had improved considerably since Winnie had first taught her the technique on that Christmas day over a year ago. Pa, can I put some in your hair too? Emma asked impishly. I don't think flowers and cowboy hats mix well, Yancy replied with mock seriousness. Please, Emma wheedled. Just one behind your ear, so you match Mama Winnie and me. Unable to resist his daughter's pleading, Yancy sighed dramatically. If you insist, but don't tell the ranch hands or I'll never hear the end of it. Delighted with her victory, Emma carefully selected a particularly vibrant blue wildflower and tucked it behind her father's ear. There, now you're part of our ranch too. The simple statement, echoing her words from that first Christmas when Winnie had taught her to braid flowers, brought tears to Winnie's eyes. Yancy, noticing her emotion, reached across Emma to squeeze her hand gently. We're all part of Crosswind now, he said softly. A family rooted in this land, growing together like these wildflowers, stronger and more beautiful for being together. Emma nodded solemnly, then continued with her task of weaving flowers into Winnie's hair. As she worked, she hummed a tune Winnie had taught her, a folk song about home and belonging that seemed perfectly suited to the moment. Watching his daughter and wife, with his infant son sleeping peacefully between them, Yancy felt a completeness he had once thought forever beyond his reach. The path that had led them here through loss and loneliness, unexpected meetings and new beginnings seemed now like a trail meant to be followed, leading always toward this moment of perfect contentment. As the sun began its slow descent toward the distant mountains, casting golden light across the meadow where Emma's cousins still played, the Zeller family remained on the porch, bound together by love and the simple joy of being exactly where they belonged.